It is Creighton, Nebraska week after all, and I was just thinking recently about how long my guest today has known me. I think we hit a decade this year of you knowing me because I think we met my junior year of high school. So we're here on it. I think we hit a decade this year, quite the milestone. But my guest is, of course, my former co-host on the Nebraska Shoot Around podcast. He does great work for Hurrdat Sports, covering Nebraska volleyball, all things Creighton. It's Jacob season between me and my guest today, Jacob Padilla from Hurrdat Sports. It is basketball. We share a name, we share a birthday. We used to share a pod, but now that it's Creighton, Nebraska week, here we are back together again. Jacob, how we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's good to come on the pod now that you've kind of hit it big and this thing's starting to blow up. No pun intended.
Hit it big. Wow, look at that. Look at this. He's bringing the puns right away. But no, this is good. This is making me feel a little nostalgic recording late night pods talking Nebraska Creighton week. Look at this. How far we've come. But we'll start yesterday at the time of recording this Sunday's game in Sioux Falls between Nebraska and St. Mary's. You tuned in. You had some thoughts. I was in the building along with our mutual friend and your coworker Mike Sauter and plenty of others. But Nebraska falls by 3 at the Pentagon to St. Mary's. I thought you kind of hit the nail on the head with one of your tweets yesterday. What were your general thoughts, takes from the Huskers coming up short?
Yeah, it kind of boils down to two areas that have been constant sources of concern so far this season. There have been maybe a few brief moments of respite, but the turnovers, they're losing the possession battle, and it's 15 points that led to 21, or 15 turnovers that led to 21 points for St. Mary's, and those turnovers were spread around. You had 3 from Braxton Mia in just 20 minutes, 3 from Raleigh Worcester. You can't be having that from your point guard. 2 from Andrew Morgan in limited minutes. 2 from Bryce Williams. 2 from Juwan Gary. Just a little bit of everybody. Aaron Ewa, Sam Hoiberg, Connor Seaton, everybody got in the mix there. And then the 3-point shooting is becoming a massive concern. We knew that was going to be an issue, at least that they had to address with who they were losing from last year's team. And they made their bets on some certain guys that they needed to shoot really well. And so far this season, they have not gotten more than one of those guys hitting shots in any given game at the same time. And the result is they've been playing closer games than they should against in their bye games, and kind of failed to keep up in their first true test of the season.
Yeah, they now have 22 made threes on the season, and Connor Esiason has 5 of those 22. They were definitely betting on the bounce back from him and Griffiths. And honestly, I don't know who your third option would be in terms of
It's
guys
Bryce.
they want.
And
of guys they want to be
Bryce,
3-point shooters.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be Bryce, and he's shooting 29% on 3.5 attempts a game. And the problem is especially with that starting lineup, when he's your best shooter, he can't space the floor for himself and also go create. So the threes that he's getting aren't necessarily super high looks from 3, I don't think. He's having to kind of create some of his own there. And also he doesn't have spacing around him, so it's making it tougher for him to go create. So a lot of issues that they're working through right now.
Yeah, it kind of the vibe, at least offensively right now, especially when the shots aren't falling, kind of reminds me of the last 2 teams I was a part of, where if James Palmer Jr. wasn't scoring, who the hell was going to score? And it was just a question of where are the shots going to come from if he's off or he's having a bad night. And it helps that Bryce is already channeling, what JPJ did a lot those last 2 years, getting downhill, getting to the free throw line. But if he, I don't know how many clunkers Nebraska can afford from Bryce Williams this season. Because if he's going to have to do a lot. He's going to be dead tired by the end of this season, because he's definitely going to have to do a lot for this team. And that doesn't take away anything from him. I still think he's a really good player. I think he's going to end up being one of the leading scorers in the Big Ten, but that may say more about the Big Ten than it does about him with how the conference has looked to start the season. And And I will say this: I think St. Mary's is pretty damn good too. But like you noted, I mean, they didn't make their free throws. They missed 11. Nebraska only missed 4. They converted those turnovers, but I'm interested to see what St. Mary's does in the long run. Obviously, when you think of them in that league, they're kind of always been in Gonzaga's shadow. They've always played second fiddle to Gonzaga, but I think those St. Mary's Gonzaga games are going to be pretty entertaining in the WCC this year. And then I'm interested to see what the ceiling is for the Gales ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, they lose what's his name? To
Mahaney.
UConn. Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Just exited my brain as soon as I opened my mouth. I love when that happens. But I mean, Mikey Lewis looked pretty darn impressive for them coming off the bench. 23 points, hit some big time threes. He made as many threes as Nebraska's entire team did by himself. St. Mary's as a team shot 11 of 23, Nebraska 5 of 17. So again, that's just going to be really hard to overcome no matter how many twos and free throws you're scoring, especially if you lose the possession battle. And so, yeah, Bryce is off to a good start. Like, it's hard to, even in that game, he had what, 26?
28.
28, that's right. Yeah. He was going to work, but 28, 1 assist. Nobody else was really. Yeah, you had Bearcat. All right, if we want to go to positive, we'll get to that in a moment. Bearcat's second half there, but you look at the team as a whole. Juwan, you're getting about what you're going to get from him. Like, I don't think you can play maybe a little bit better, but in terms of just overall production, like 10.5 points a game, like he's not going to be a 15-point a game guy. That's just not his game. Raleigh, I think you've actually it's been weird. He's been scoring better than I think I would have expected, but the playmaking has not been there. Significantly negative assist to turnover ratio thus far. And it's hard to get assists if guys can't make shots, but 3 turnovers a game to only 1.8 assists a game, but he's been an efficient scoring. And actually he shot, I mean, it's low volume, but 37.5% from 3 is he has hit a few early on. So it's kind of been weird what you're getting from him. But beyond that, you kind of need somebody else. Who's going to be the second scorer on this team? Because if Juwan is your second best offensive player, then that's probably not going to go well for you. And the guys that they need to hit haven't really so far. You mentioned Gavin Griffiths, 3.8 points a game, 25% from 3. That's not going to work. Connor Segan, 9.3 points a game, 35% from 3. Okay, not great. He's really streaky at this point. Not a game in and game out type of guy that you can rely on. And then Bearcat is kind of probably maybe where we go next with this conversation on that game, but up to 10 points, 6 boards a game after a really strong second half, not giving you the floor spacing that you hoped. But what do you see from him in the second half of that game?
I mean, 13 of his 15 come in the second half. After the first 3 games, I thought he looked low energy, low effort.
Yeah.
That was definitely the most energy and effort we've seen from him to this point. We saw some personality from him. People were questioning, where's the personality going to come from on this team? When you lose Keisei Tominaga and, Bryce Williams, I have half jokingly, half seriously called him the Terminator for 2 years because he'll show no emotion. He'll just go get buckets. And we saw personality and we saw energy and high motor from Bearcat, especially in that second half. 13 of his 15 points, he has 5 boards. He's, playing in the paint, getting fouled. And, I think he's kind of the guy that I think Nebraska is the highest on him, like out of the portal guys, because we've heard Fred Hoiberg, we heard it in Chicago at Media Day, and we've kind of heard like just wait, just wait has been Fred's mantra with like the shot making and everything, but he has remained incredibly optimistic and incredibly I don't want to say he's been waxing poetic, but he's been talking really high about Bearcat just as a potential weapon for this team, and he's kind of where I have my eye as the guy that they may want to rise up and be that second guy behind Bryce, especially in terms of scoring output. I think he may be your leading candidate after yesterday.
Yeah, and he was making plays on defense too. He was active, steals, deflections, blocks, like just all around really, really impressive spurt in that second half to give them a shot in that game. And he is the guy that they kind of need to really pop. He can provide them the versatility they need to play the 4, play the 5. Still don't know. Still trying to figure out, all right, how high is the skill level, because as you can see, like he doesn't get off the ground very fast or very high. Not terribly dynamic, and some of the stuff may not work as easily against some of the more athletic front lines they're going to see in the Big Ten. But like if he can start hitting shots to go with some of the other skill things that we've seen from him, he can be a really interesting piece. Again, I don't know what that is in terms of what you're gonna hope to get from him from a points per game standpoint. It is going to have to be probably a little bit more balanced as far as the second guy. But I think if you're looking for a reason for optimism coming out of that game, he is definitely the one, and it changes things for Nebraska and their versatility if he can get a little bit more consistent and produce the way that like you said, Fred Hoiberg believes he can.
Yeah, and I think he definitely, I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1, but I think he is the guy on the roster who fits the blueprint of like the playmaking forward that we've seen the last couple years. Rink Mass, Derek Walker. I think even back to when we did our pod together, I've said that since Fred has been here, he's been chasing the ghost of George Niang, and not skinny George Niang that's a 3-point specialist in the NBA, chunky George Niang from Iowa State. When I was so into those teams that I thought about going to school there, his vert wasn't very high, but he could initiate offense, he could play make, he could initiate either bringing the ball up or through the high post. And that is in no way saying that Berke is on the level of what George Niang was on at Iowa State. But like schematically, I think he definitely fits the profile of the playmaking big that has been so paramount to success for Fred Hoiberg at the college level at Nebraska and back to Iowa State.
Yeah, and it's not really happening with Braxton Mia. I think that he's trying to play that role, and that's just not his skill set. And that I think is probably part of the kind of the offensive dysfunction we've seen, just the clunkiness. So yeah, if he can kind of grow into that role, then you can slide Juwan down to the 4. You can get get a Sejan out there, maybe get a little bit more floor spacing, go a little bit smaller lineup, see if that can unlock. And we've seen that, but maybe for kind of more extended minutes, and see if that can unlock something offensively for them. But yeah, I think Andrew Morgan, I think he's really solid for what he is. And he does, I think, fit and brings some toughness. And we saw him knock down his first 3, which he can do. It's just not a high enough volume to truly make a dent in their 3-point issues. It's going to be a bonus anytime he makes one, but he's capable. I just don't know that like Andrew Morgan starting 5 in the Big Ten is going to lead you to a lot of wins, even if he is a useful rotation piece at this level.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's shown flashes. Like you said, he hits his first 3 yesterday. He was kind of the first guy to match St. Mary's intensity. Like when he came in the first half, like Nebraska was kind of sleepy. They were a step slow, and he kind of came in. He was like, I'll at least try to match the intensity that St. Mary's is showing. Gets to the line a couple times, finishes as the leading rebounder. Him and Berke each with 5. But I'm kind of right there with you. He's a role player. He's not. I don't think he's gonna work his way into the starting lineup. But that also plays into obviously the big question right now is the 3-point shooting. But I remain skeptical as to what Fred Hoiberg wants Braxton Mia to be on this team. The offense, it looks clunky already, but when he's on the floor, it looks even clunkier. And when he's like getting the ball at the elbow and it just doesn't look like he knows what to do with it, it just reinforces my point that I'm just like, it's a weird fit. I don't really know. He finishes yesterday, plays 21 minutes, 3 turnovers, a block, 3 rebounds, 0 of 1 from the field. Fred Hoiberg, he has never, he's said in the offseason he's never had a player like Braxton Mia. and I don't really know what the fit is or what the ideal role is, because if they're going to stick with the no middle, the no middle, force baseline, scramble out to shooters defense with him on the court, that kind of worries me a little bit about, like, that just does not, I don't think that's your best course of action with a true 7-footer on the floor.
Yeah, and that's something they're going to have to figure out. And I think that's the kind of the story of the season so far is with the new pieces, and it's I mean it's a common thing across college basketball with all the player movement now. But
Mhm.
you got to figure out what the best roles are for these guys and how to maximize the new players within their system and figure out where guys can fit and how they can best contribute. And I mean, a lot of that you you have an idea of what that is when you kind of go into the portal and study the film and see and envision what a role might be. But until the guys actually get out there on the court, you don't know 100%. And the guys, it's just a projection at that point. So we're still early enough that some guys can settle into some roles. But yeah, I don't know with how well Braxton fits with the rest of this roster and the way they're trying to play.
Mhm.
Um, because it's not like they've got a lot of floor spacing that can open him up as a rim runner and get some lobs and some rim pressure that way. Um, and like you said, well, kind of where does he fit into their defensive style? The double team the post, the steer away from the middle, the fly out the shooters. Like I don't know where he kind of fits into that as a 7'1", 265-pound man. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they evolve and what roles guys settle into as they. I mean, they got a lot more time in the non-conference than their next opponent does to figure things out because of the schedule.
Yep.
Um, so we'll have to see how well Fred Hoiberg's able to take advantage of those extra kind of lower level games and try to find some answers.
Absolutely. So we can transition now to Friday, which is a double feature, which I think is going to be pretty cool. We'll have the Nebraska Creighton women's game at 4 o'clock at DJ Sokol Arena. Nebraska is going to be coming in ranked number 21 in the country after a record-setting barrage of threes at the Pentagon, something that the men's team did not replicate the following day. Nebraska takes on North Alabama first on Tuesday night. You're going to be in the building for that, correct? And, and
We got to talk about that now. I'm not sure yet. I
okay,
may.
well, gotcha. Well, Nebraska's got North Alabama on Tuesday. Creighton does not play again this week until they host Nebraska on Friday afternoon. We can start with the Huskers. What obviously they go to the NCAA tournament last year. They get the win. Big for Amy Williams and co to get that done, and then we see Amy Williams going against her former school, going back to her home state. And it was kind of the Britt Prince show on Saturday at the Pentagon. 23 points on 10 of 13 shooting for the true freshman. If anyone hadn't seen, I mean, I feel like it's tough to have not watched Britt Prince after 4 years of dominance at Elkhorn North, 4 state titles, and now she's doing. I mean, she did her thing on Saturday, kind of just doing almost whatever she wanted. Obviously against a Summit League opponent, but. What have you seen from the Nebraska women so far? And obviously, it starts with the big three of Markowski, Potts, and now Britt Prince.
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting to watch Britt early on. Coming in as a freshman, seems like she's really been trying to just kind of fit in and play point guard. We haven't really seen her cut it loose offensively up until this last game. And I don't know if that's just the game flow or if she's starting to feel a little bit more comfortable and to get her shots from. And been really impressed with her playmaking. And she's already developed some pretty nice chemistry with Markowski. Just feeding her in the post, hitting her in transition over the top when she gets a seal. That's been impressive early on. I think obviously missed one game, but 13 points, 4.3 assists to one turnover a game. Like you'll 4-to-1 assist turnover ratio from a freshman point guard. You'll take that all day long. So that's certainly, I think she's been kind of what you'd hope to see. The jumper hasn't fallen quite as much as it will down the line, but I think the other story of the season so far is Natalie Potts and the kind of confidence she's playing with, and the start she's gotten off to. She was really good the other night. She's been good almost every game so far this season. 17 and a half a game, 8 boards. And the really impressive thing is her 3-point shooting. She is 8 from 11 to start the season. And that was an off-season focus for her. She talked about it. Amy Williams talked about it at Big Ten Media Days. How that's the first thing they both brought up when talking about her and the next step for her. And she was a Big Ten Freshman of the Year last year, but was more off of the hustle and the interior scoring. She took some threes, but in the 20s percentage wise. So to be shooting it with confidence and effectiveness, that I think that's going to open up some things, especially again we know what kind of a force Markowski is on the block. The more floor spacing you have around her, and the versatility with Potts and Markowski able to kind of interchange within the high-low game, have one post up, one space of perimeter because they're both making threes. That opens up some exciting possibilities for this team.
Absolutely, and we can transition to a preview of the matchup on Friday. They've it's kind of a similar theme to the men's series with Creighton as well. They've struggled, to put it lightly, against the Creighton women these last few years. I remember the game 2 years ago at Sokol where I think both teams were ranked, and Creighton runs them out of the gym. Friday afternoon, Creighton. They bring back a trio of seniors in Lauren Jensen, Morgan Molly, and Molly Mogensen. Lauren Jensen has been on one to start the year. She's been a ton of fun to watch, but two early losses, and obviously, Jim Flannery is always never going to be afraid to schedule a tough non-con. But they go on the road to Brookings and they lose to South Dakota State. They go on the road to Manhattan and lose to Kansas State, and now they come back home for a big rivalry game on Friday. And it's kind of, you look at the roster, they bring back that trio, but they didn't bring one player back, and that was Emma Ronsick, who's now at Colorado State playing with her sister. So what do you see? What have you seen from Jensen so far? I mean, she's been on a heater. I mean, she's always been a really fun player to watch. But then, outside of her and Molly, I mean, it's kind of, it's been a little bit of tough sledding on offense for the Jays.
Yeah. It starts with Lauren Jensen, like you said, and she's just a really good basketball player. The variety of different ways that she's scoring over the last couple of years, she's kind of stepped into more of a combo guard role, where she played point for a lot of last season and initiated a lot of things. In addition to being an off-the-ball threat with her ability to shoot, she can get to her mid-range pull up whenever she wants, and she's a pretty crafty finisher as well. So she's just really grown into an all-around terrific basketball player, coming back for her extra year. And the other, I think, one that you're excited about early on is Keani Lockett. Is kind of the other exciting story from the start to the season, and I wrote about her on Hurrdat Sports, and she's just continued to play well since then. Averaging 11 points, 2 assists to 1 turnover, shooting 61% from the field through 3 games. She's one that stepped in the starting lineup for Emma Ronsick, but that makes Creighton really small. She is a 5'8" point guard playing with another point guard in Molly Mogensen and Jensen as a shooting guard. And then you got Morgan Molly and Mallory Brake, two kind of like 3-4 tweeners as your 4 and your 5. So that's kind of where Creighton has run into some issues early on. It doesn't bode well for the matchup with Nebraska, considering what we were just talking about with Markowski and Potts. But Creighton's small, and they haven't gotten the firepower to kind of offset what they're giving up at this point. you talk about that South Dakota State game. That game kind of changed when their 6-3 post. I think she scored 12 of her 17 in the third quarter when Creighton went from leading at halftime to trailing after the third quarter, and were never able to pull level again after that. Went down to Kansas State, a top 10 team, and with a 6'6" center inside with ridiculous production throughout her career, and had absolutely no answer for her or the team around her. So that's like Ronsick wasn't. I mean, she was 6'2" or so. So it's not like she was center either with great size. But what she was able to do, both holding her own defensively and inside and rebounding, and kind of taking advantage of those matchups on the other end, they haven't really gotten enough out of the supporting cast outside of Jensen and Lockett. And Kennedy Townsend has been good in her role, but beyond that, Morgan Molly's been really streaky. Molly Mogensen is kind of taking a slight step back from where she was last year, and so what we saw, they went to the Division II level in the portal to replace Ronsick, just because they weren't able to go land somebody of her caliber from another Division I school, just with the resources available and the path they chose. And Brooke Littrell, it's a big leap, as good as she was at the Division II level, and she does fit Creighton's mold of what they want in a forward, in terms of being a skilled player that can dribble, pass, shoot. But like I said, it's a big leap, and she hasn't quite kind of figured things out to play at the level they need her to yet. So they got a lot of production to replace with Ronsick, and they haven't quite figured out how to do that just yet.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, the size disparity is the first thing that jumps off the page. Looking at that matchup, Creighton won by 5 last year. They're on a 2-game streak in the series, but it's kind of been going back to 2016. Creighton has only lost once, and that was in the 21-22 season in Lincoln by 5 to Nebraska. So Nebraska looking to get off the schneid in the rivalry, and Creighton looking to bounce back after a interesting start to the year. But that's the first game, Friday, 4:00 at Sokol. And then are you going to be at both? You doing the double, or are you just?
I'm planning on it. Hopefully we don't get overtime and there's something like that makes this even more difficult of a.
Yeah, no, it's a long weekend for a lot of people.
Plan is to be in the building for both games.
Yeah, long weekend for a lot of people between the two cities and between covering multiple events on Friday and Saturday. But we can transition now to the second game of the doubleheader on Friday night, and that is the Nebraska-Creighton men's matchup. Creighton, right now, Creighton started the year relatively light. UTRGV, FDU, Kansas City, and who was the fourth team? Who was the fourth team they played? UTRGV, FDU, Kansas City, and Houston Christian. That is it. Yep, that's it. Houston Christian. So they've started off relatively light, but I feel like they've kind of gotten. I mean, they've shown improvement like through every game that I've watched them play. This team's fast, man. They're fast. Kind of feeling a little similar, at least tempo and pace wise to that team from a couple years ago with Nemhard and co. What have you obviously they lose Shireman, they lose Alexander. They're both, doing their thing. They're on NBA rosters, pretty good players. But it starts with the big guy. We saw him drop 49 points in the season opener against UTRGV, and he's going to legitimately be in the running for National Player of the Year, in my opinion, in college basketball this year. What is the biggest, I guess my first question is, what's the biggest difference you've seen so far, aside from personnel, with this year's Creighton team compared to last season?
Yeah, so just overall, it definitely, I think the thing that does stand out is that what you mentioned there, the speed. They are pushing on every single chance they get, or whether it's a stop, a bucket, they're getting the ball in, and they are running down the floor. They're sprinting out. They're passing ahead. You see Stephen Ashworth has been great at pushing the pace. Pop Isaacs as well. Jemiah Neal has been a force in transition with his ability to finish and his athleticism leaking out. Ryan Kalkbrenner is one of the best in the country among big guys at running the floor for easy points and beating his man down the floor. So that's something they've really leaned into early on. Is like Creighton's always played with pace. They've always tried to kind of push it a little bit, but it hasn't always been we're running to score. We're running to kind of just stay in a rhythm to put you into rotation to hopefully put some pressure on you to where you're going to break down at some point. Right now, they're running to score. They're looking for fast break points, and they're getting them because of all those guys that I talked about. Like everybody's kind of doing their part to realize, hey, if I'm above the break, shot goes up, I'm leaking out because we got other guys down there. They're going to go clear the glass, and then whether it's pushing the ball off the dribble or making that hit ahead pass. They've just been on the same page in transition all season long. They've done a great job of conditioning that style of play throughout the offseason, and the guys have really bought into it because that's hard. Like it takes a lot of effort to run the way that they have, and to not the shot goes up, you get a rebound, not stop, catch your breath. It's like you're immediately on to the next play, and they've done that really well as a team so far. So that's probably the thing that has stood out the most about this team. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner. And we saw, I think this last game, and we're starting to see maybe a little bit more of kind of the former version of Kalkbrenner, a little bit more timid, that team not looking for him quite as much as they did to open the season. But like that 49-point game happened, one, because UTRGV decided we're not going to double team outside of more than a handful of possessions all game. But they were just determined to get him the ball, and he was stealing, he was posting up, he was rolling to the rim hard. He was just putting pressure on them on every single possession, and he was scoring through double teams or when they did send a second offender occasionally. I think this last Kansas City game, he was a little bit more passive. Still got 14 and 11 or 12 or whatever it was. Still played well, but just the opportunities out there. But that is something I think they need to continue to hammer as the competition gets tougher. Is they need to establish him as a force and not let teams kind of bait them into forgetting about him. And they're sending backside help, so I'm just going to make the skip pass and shoot the three every single time. Like they need to continue to force the ball into him, and he's got to be aggressive when he does get that ball. So that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to as the season plays out, because they don't have quite as much firepower as they did last year on the perimeter with Shireman and Trey Alexander, and with their ability to make plays for themselves and others. They're going to need Kalkbrenner to continue to be the focal point, and then that'll make the game easier for everybody else around him.
Yeah, and looking at their personnel, obviously you bring back Kalkbrenner, you bring back Ashworth, two sixth-year guys. They're both married. They both have stock portfolios and 401ks. They're old dudes. They played a lot of college basketball. And then your third leading scorer, you mentioned Jemiah Neal. How he's looked to start the year, just under 10, 6 boards a game. Almost 5 assists a game too. He's done a little bit of everything. He's impressed me so far, from what I've seen watching them go. And then the Pop Isaacs edition. That was going to be my second question, so I'm going to lead right into it. What have you seen from Isaacs? You missed the one game against FDU, right? He missed the FDU game, or was it the opener that he missed?
Yeah.
The opener was the UTRGV game that Pop missed, but he had a really impressive shooting outing in that Purdue exhibition game, and then he's played in 3 games, just under 10, just under 6 assists, but 33% from the field, 29% from 3. What have you seen from him so far?
Yeah, that he did. It looked really good in that Purdue exhibition. And obviously, teams aren't game planning to take certain guys away in an exhibition like that. But that's still a high-level opponent, and he and Ashworth look great playing together and both hitting shots and all that. And then, unfortunately, he missed. It wasn't just the game he missed. I think Max mentioned, like, leading up to his return in the second game, he had practiced maybe like 2 out of a 10, 12-day stretch or something like that, 10 to 12-day stretch. So he's missing time in practice. He missed a game. And he just hasn't really, I think, been able to recapture that rhythm. Shooting 29% from three, like you said, but he was shooting close to 50% in live action in the preseason in their practices. They track all that, and like they were really encouraged by the way he was playing and the shots he was hitting and all that. And it hasn't really translated the last 3 games. So that's definitely, I think, probably you look for areas of improvement. That's number one, is you need to get him playing more like they believe he's capable of and that he's shown, because that really kind of unlocks everything for the team. Like if you've got, because Ashworth is playing at a phenomenal level to start the season, 16 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting 45% from three. Like he's been everything that you need him to be, and then some. And we talked about Kalkbrenner already, and the force that he's been shooting. He tanked his percentage, dropped under 90% from the field after that, missing 2 shots in that last game. I don't know what's going on with that. But he, 26 a game on a 92% effective field goal percentage. You'll take that. So it really is. You do need Isaacs to kind of be that other guy in that trio, because I think all the role players are going to be kind of hit or miss, are going to be a little bit more up and down, because that's the nature of role players. You need him to be more than a role player for Creighton to accomplish its goals. And he hasn't been there just yet, but it's also only 3 games with a new team coming off of missed time with the injury. So it's not something that I'm concerned about yet, but that is an area that is going to have to pick up, which has already started to happen with their other transfer in Jemiah Neal. You mentioned he was kind of, I think, one of the stories coming out of that Kansas City game. Just his all-around play, and he finished double-double, I think 3rd career double-double, first at Creighton, 11 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 0 turnovers. And early on, like, I'm gonna be honest, like the feedback wasn't great on him from the preseason and kind of the way things were working out. And I think after that Iowa State scrimmage, something seemed to click, where he, coming from Arizona State, like that offense is completely dysfunctional. Like it was painful to watch.
It's not just the offense; it's the entire program. But with this, we're not here to talk about that.
Yes, it's go watch Danny Hurley's team, and then flip over to Bobby Hurley's team, and you will not get further on either end of the spectrum there. But neither here nor there. Like he's not coming from a great spot, coming to a completely different team. He took a lot of bad shots at Arizona State, and at Creighton, you don't have to take those shots nearly as often. And he was learning that early on. And early in the season, he almost swung too far the other way, to where he was passing up shots that he need him to take, because the passes were leading them into tougher shots and tougher situations. So I think the last few games, we started to see him really find that kind of sweet spot between playmaking and being aggressive himself. And transition has been a huge part of that. Like when you got a 2-on-1, or you got a breakaway, it's 1-on-1, a lot of space to work with. There's not a lot of decisions to make. It's just, all right, how am I going to get this up and in? He doesn't have to really think a lot when he's attacking the basket in transition. And so a lot of his buckets have come on fast breaks, where you've really seen his athleticism. But the playmaking, that's kind of been something that I didn't expect it to be the level that it's at, even after watching this film last year. And he's done a great job of finding Kalkbrenner and building that chemistry. And he's been looking for shooters too. Again, 6 assists and 0 turnovers in that game. Like that from your 3rd ball handler, that's going to win you a lot of games. You had 17 assists to 4 turnovers between Ashworth, Isaacs, and Neal in that Kansas City game. So if he's going to continue to play at that level, that unlocks a lot of things for this team, and they need him to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then last, personnel question. I feel like the biggest question outside of Neal coming into the year was kind of the 3-4, like in between, especially the 4 spot, where you've got, Jason Green, Isaac Trout, true freshman Jackson McAndrew, who I'm still really high on. Those 3 guys all kind of, battling to, rise above, assert themselves at that spot. And find something you love as much as Isaac Trout loves a three from that right corner. I feel like every time I've seen him pull, it's been one of those shots from the right corner. But what have you seen from that trio to start the year? And who do you think is, if you had to pick a guy to rise above at the 4 spot long term, who'd you pick?
I mean, long term, you got to go with McAndrew, just
Oh,
the
well,
youngest
yeah,
one
yeah.
there, and this season, I don't know. We've already seen, like, Jason Green was the winner of the offseason, and
Mhm.
he won that starting 4 spot, and then he got hurt right before the season started, missed a little bit, missed the Iowa State exhibition, and was kind of eased back in from there, and it hasn't really clicked. He's kind of been struggling to find his place offensively. He's kind of given them some versatility. He's had to play some 3, some 4, and some 5, just because of they've only had their full complement of players one time so far this season, between various injuries and other things. So that's
Mhm.
and I mean, not their full complement. Fedor Zugic hasn't been cleared yet, so that's going to add another
Yep.
wild card further down the road. But
Yep.
so that every game, their rotation has been different, because Isaac's missing the first game, that impacts your guard minutes, and then Mason Miller's missed the last 2. I'd expect I think he'll probably be ready for the Nebraska game with the time off in between games, and I think they probably just held him out as a precaution to make sure he gets 100% healthy, that Kansas City game, because Mac didn't seem concerned about it. But that's another guy that you kind of just throw into that 3-4 mix of, all right, who's going to play these minutes, who's going to emerge. And I think it's going to be one where I think you're going to continue to see all 3 of those guys to a certain extent, at least. And whoever makes enough plays to get extended run and get into a rhythm, that's probably going to be the guy that gets to play the most minutes among those 3. It's been pretty even so far. All those guys have gotten quite a bit of time. With I think 22 minutes for Isaac Trout in this last one is probably as many minutes as he's played. But McAndrew came in and had his. See, that's the thing. The impressive thing about McAndrew, he went 0 for 7 from 3 in their last game, and then came out and scored 15 points in 16 minutes. Went 3 of 4 from 3. Got a dunk in there. Got a couple of putbacks. So he got a putback and then got fouled on an offensive rebound. Like he's definitely somebody to the fans can be excited about. But I do think it's going to continue to be somewhat of a rotation at that spot, because all 3 guys have showed they can help the team. None of the 3 have necessarily grabbed onto that spot and emerged like, I need 30 minutes at this position yet.
Yeah, I think Jackson McAndrew is going to be a dude. I think he is the next, I think he's the next dude in that program. Obviously, Minnesota Gatorade Player of the Year, highly acclaimed, recruit. And I think he's going to be a guy down the line for Creighton. Looking at the matchup with Nebraska, the first thing that jumps out to me is Nebraska's offense so far this season has been incredibly reliant on going downhill, drawing fouls, and getting to the free throw line. Something Creighton does not do is foul. Right now, they are the number 1 team in free throw defense in the country, according to Ken Palm. It's kind of been the book on them the last few years. Obviously the defense, funnel everything into Kalkbrenner. If they get by, the perimeter, you've got the multiple time defending Big East Defensive Player of the Year in drop coverage, protecting the post. They don't foul, so that's kind of the something's got to give. Looking at the the matchup, statistically, but and I obviously Nebraska's got a tough hill to climb. Ken Palm projects a 10-point Creighton win. Torvik and Evan Miyakawa have the same score projection, a 9-point Creighton win. But I mean, the blueprint is going to have to be eerily similar to the last time they played in Omaha. Their rotations are going to have to be insanely crisp if they're going to, rely on the defense like we talked about earlier. And I mean, you assume they're going to double Kalkbrenner. I guess there is a world where they don't, and it's everybody but him's got to beat you. But I don't know, if that would be a legitimate option. Looking at, I mean, what jumps off the page, when you look at the matchup, whether it be statistically or personnel wise.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them try something similar to the way they beat them in Omaha a few years ago with Derek Walker and Sam Greasel in that game where and obviously Brian Kalkbrenner was sick at that point, so that played a part of it. But Nebraska was determined to not let him beat them. Everything was shifted his way. They weren't letting him get easy touches. They were doubling. They were sending backside help. They were not letting Creighton get easy touches into him, and they were daring Creighton to make threes. And I mean, typically against this program, that's not a great strategy over the long haul. But if you feel
Especially
like
in this matchup, we've seen how that can escalate quickly.
Yeah, but if you feel like you don't match up like head to head, then introducing more of the 3-point variance is probably not a bad bet, especially because Creighton hasn't shot the lights out so far this season at 31.5%. We've seen some guys get hot, but we haven't seen the team as a whole get hot really just yet. For every guy that has a good game, you had somebody you're counting on to hit threes that was cold in that game. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think we'll probably see them do the double team, the flying around, try to chase off shooters. But if you end up getting some looks off, then if you can make them, more power to you. But we're not going to let you beat us in the paint. So I think that's probably, we saw Nebraska have success with that strategy once before. Again, it's really kind of, it's really risky. But if you don't feel like you're going to be able to keep up playing them straight up, then maybe that risk is worth it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably. I mean the personnel obviously is different, but I mean looking at it, I mean that's probably. I don't want to say their best bet, but I think it is probably the most likely outcome when you look at the likely starting lineups. Nebraska, what I've called the tall ball lineup with Raleigh, Bryce, Juwan, Berke, and Mia. It's, if you want to try to double calc, I mean, a 7'1" guy and a 6'10" guy is not a bad way to do it. I don't know about those two trying to fly out to shooters afterwards, but it's not a bad way to do it. I mean, Nebraska will have the size advantage in the backcourt. I think regardless, with Ashworth and Isaacs being, two just over 6 foot tall guys, at least that's what they're listed at. But I think they're going to have the size advantage in the backcourt, but the speed, the athleticism difference is going to be, it is a tale as old as time. The Creighton Avalanche, where they're the faster team, they're the more efficient team, and they, just go on a run, and there's a picture of what the scoreboard is at the under 12 and people tweet it for the next decade. We've seen that story a few times before, and I don't know if it's going to be via the three, but I mean, if I'm, the athleticism advantage and the pace advantage definitely goes to Creighton for sure.
Yeah, if Nebraska does start that lineup, and I mean, we're going to see that lineup regardless. The matchups are fascinating, and where the advantages might be, because I would assume if you're Creighton, you probably want to put Jemiah Neal on Bryce Williams, which means one of Stephen Ashworth or Pop Isaacs is going to have to guard Juwan Gary.
Yep.
And while you're not worried necessarily about Gary going off and creating 20 points on his own, could he take advantage of that to crash the offensive glass? Could he get some bully ball buckets, some cuts to the rim, get some seals, and get him the ball and try to take advantage of that size mismatch that way? And even the point guard spot, like you mentioned, Ashworth and Raleigh Worcester familiar with each other. Both the former Utah State Aggies, and they both point guards, but completely different skill sets and completely different types of point guards. Raleigh's 6'5", Ashworth is generously listed at 6'1". Ashworth, we know what kind of a shooter he is. Raleigh's more of a guy that's looking to get downhill and use footwork and up and unders and just bully ball to score his points. So significant size advantage there. Ashworth has gotten quite a bit better on defense during his time at Creighton, but he's still small, and Raleigh is not. So I'll be fascinated to see kind of what Creighton does in that matchup. And The fortunate thing is while they're giving up size, they've got Kalkbrenner on the back line, and you can always try to direct the drives inside. So like if Gary is going to try to take advantage of his size mismatch, he's probably going to have Kalkbrenner rotating over. And
Yeah.
if Worcester can get downhill, Kalkbrenner is probably dropping down to try to make that shot tough. So it's going to be a fun chess match between two pretty good offensive coaches in this one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was doing a little like background research, and this is quite the blast from the past. Here's a Salt Lake Tribune headline from January of 2021. Utah State makes beautiful basketball music on offense, led by two true freshman point guards. Raleigh Worcester and Stephen Ashworth employ different styles, but their games complement each other and make the Aggie offense hum. Uh, Craig Smith knew how to pick them when he was at
Yeah.
Utah State. That's not too bad. That they Raleigh and Ashworth came in together as true freshmen. New Michigan State center Simon Zapala was also on that team, as was Nemus Keita. I mean, Craig Smith had a pretty good run at Utah State, and it'll be cool to see that full circle moment. Two guys who came in together as true freshmen, on their last ride in college basketball, going up against each other in a pretty big rivalry game on Friday night.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that until you mentioned it. That angle of this. I think Creighton's going to have availability on Wednesday. It'll be interesting. I don't know who we're going to end up talking to for that one. But yeah, that's certainly going to be a fun storyline to watch as we go into this one.
Definitely. So that's the preview of the Friday doubleheader. You're going to be all over the place. You're going to be at both these basketball games. You're going to be at a pretty big volleyball match on Saturday night too. It's a full day. It's a full weekend for anybody who covers multiple teams, multiple sports in this market. Jacob, thanks for doing this, man. Always good to talk hoops with you. We don't do it nearly enough, but I'll see you Friday night at the Chai.
Yeah, looking forward to it.